The following is a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome into Students of the Game. My name is Alex Baumann, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Nathan Glidewell. It was a pretty good week of college football. We had six ranked matchups, which is the most since, I think, 2006. So you had a lot of good games. There was one ranked matchup that was pretty disappointing. We'll cover that and all the other ones. But first, we got one AAA story today, so we're going to go over that and then hop right into the college football. The story today for AAA is, according to an NFL press release, Usher will headline the Super Bowl 58 halftime show presented by Apple Music at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas. Nathan, do you like Usher being the headliner for this halftime show?
Yeah, I'm indifferent to it. Usher is okay. He's not for me, but I'm sure other people like him. And as far as like other choices, I mean, all of the people I want to do the halftime show have already done it pretty much. So I think I'm pretty well covered. So it's time for some other people to get their highlights in. I'm sure Usher will do a great job.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Usher really hasn't had a big hit since like the early 2000s. I know he released an album back in 2020 something, maybe 2016. Sorry, that was his last album.
Wow, long time
So
ago.
yeah, it's been a while. I'm not sure what he's going to play, if he's going to start playing his new album, which was going to release in the same kind of week as his halftime performance. I'm hoping he plays. Yeah, I would think that'd be the main song he does play. That's like one of the only, an OMG, but OMG was played at a previous Super Bowl, so I'm not sure how he's going to do that. Though I think they could have gone a different route with the performer, but you know, Usher's a great artist, even though he hasn't released much since 2016. So, or if anything, but I'm looking forward to it. Nathan, do you wish they did Taylor Swift instead?
Man, Alex, you know how much I hate Taylor Swift. I can't stand Taylor Swift. And I'm sure there are millions upon millions of people in the world that want to see Taylor Swift do a halftime show. And unfortunately, I am not one of those bunch. Honestly, it's bound to happen sometime, and I'm not going to watch it. But everyone else can have fun watching it. Just not for me.
I mean, Usher's got a lot to live up to. With Rihanna's performance last year when she just absolutely mopped the floor being pregnant, even though she was pregnant. So hopefully he can live up to that and live up to the Katy Perry, which I think is probably the best one I've experienced.
That is my favorite right there.
And don't come at me with the Michael Jackson. I don't think I was around. Or maybe I was a kid for that. I can't remember what year that was, but I never saw that. So I can't speak on it. But Katy Perry is the best one I've seen. All right, like I said, we got college football from this past weekend. Had a lot of ranked matchups, 6 of them. But we're going to start it with Alabama versus Ole Miss, number 13 Alabama versus number 15 Ole Miss. Alabama ended up winning that game 24-10. It was a rough first half. Alabama didn't score a touchdown for the third consecutive week. That's been a big issue for at least me watching Alabama football, is not being able to find the end zone in the first half of a game. But they weathered the storm in the second half, made a lot of adjustments in the locker room. I'm not sure what they did, what Nick Saban's halftime speech was, but they came out and played like a totally different Alabama team. Definitely reminiscent of the older ones back in the early 2010s and early 2000s with Nick Saban, or late 2000s, sorry. It was good to see Alabama get back to that. Jalen Milroe really struggled in the first half. I'll be the first one to say I was wondering why he was even on the field coming out of this first half, but he came out and played very well in that second half against Ole Miss. He had that one interception it was a bad pick. I mean, he threw it right to the DB. Jermaine Burton was pretty open in the flat, but he threw it over the top to a guy in double coverage, maybe even triple coverage. But outside of that, I think he played a pretty good game. 225 passing yards, a touchdown, then had 28 yards rushing. Would like to see him get more opportunities running the ball, considering how athletic he is. I think Tommy Rees did a better job in implementing the QB runs this game more than he did in the Texas game. So I think that's something to build off of there. Chase McCullin, a stud performance here, 105 rushing yards, a touchdown. That's on 17 carries. Didn't see a lot of Roydell Williams, only had 21 rushing yards himself. But when Chase McCullin was doing his thing in the offensive line in that second half, was just bullying that Ole Miss defensive front. That was good to see, considering in the first half, Seth McLaughlin couldn't snap the football. Caden Proctor was on his rear end. But in the second half, it looked like I said earlier, a totally different Alabama team, a totally different Alabama offensive line. The receiving core, Milroy spread the ball around a lot. We saw Jalen Hale get his first receiving touchdown. There's a lot of talk coming out of camp with him that he was going to have a role in this offense, and we saw it this game. I expect him to continue to have that type of role. Jermaine Burton had 62 yards receiving. CJ Dupree had 28 yards. He had Robbie Oots, Kendrick Law, Isaiah Bond do their thing with a one reception each, and then you had Kendrick Law too. But I think the big story for the whole entire team, other than the offense coming out and actually scoring touchdowns, was the defense. You had 5 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, 10 TFLs, and an interception by Terran Arnold. And talking about Terran Arnold, last year, Nathan, you saw the Tennessee game live. You wanted to drive up to Knoxville and absolutely berate Terran Arnold for his effort on Jalen Hyatt and all the Volunteers wide receivers. And going into this year, he's listed as the cornerback 2. I think you and I are both pretty worried on what that meant for this team. But the whole season, he's been honestly the second best player on this defense sometimes, maybe even sometimes third or fourth. But I think this game he was the best outside of a guy like Dallas Turner. He had 8 tackles this game, 2 passes defended, and an interception. He's been locked down, and Lane Kiffin after the game said their goal was to target Terran Arnold like they did last year. And Terran Arnold said, no, you're not going to pick on me the entire game. And he played lockdown corner. Twilliam McKinstry really hasn't been targeted this year as much as he has because he's seen as the lockdown corner, but Terran Arnold has really taken that role as well. And I'm excited to see what he does the rest of the season as the corner too. And then I kind of mentioned him, Dallas Turner, another stud performance, 2 sacks, 3.5 TFLs. And then his partner in crime, Chris Braswell, he had half a sack and 1.5 tackles for loss. So I think both these guys are finding their footing at the right time, especially with the rest of the defense. We've been kind of preaching the last couple of shows that this defensive line and these linebackers off the edge need to get more pressure on the passer. And I think it achieved it this game. You had a lot of pressure from a guy like Tim Smith. There's a couple other defensive linemen that got in there as well to force pressure. And then the last play of the game brought a double DB safety blitz and absolutely destroyed that Ole Miss offensive line. So like I said, it's good to see this defense figure it out. They've been the strength of this team the entirety of the season. And if the offense can play like they did in the second half this game, then the ceiling is so high for Alabama. But if we get the first half Alabama that we got against Ole Miss, against Mississippi State this weekend, I don't think that's going to be a huge thing. But when you go play Texas A&M in a couple weeks, it might cause some issues. The offensive line, I don't think is up to par still. Caden Proctor continues to struggle as a left tackle. Seth McLaughlin continues to struggle with snaps. I know it was much improved in the second half, but you can't come out in the first half against a team like Texas A&M, or if you get to that point, a Georgia or LSU, and struggle with snapping the ball and struggle with blocking off the edge and struggle with stunting on a block. So they got to get that hammered out. But the second half of this game was great to see. The one bad thing for Alabama was you lose Deontay Lawson in this game. He did not return. It was an ankle injury, correct, Nathan?
I believe so. I don't know the extent of it, but it didn't look like it was that bad. He got up under his own weight, so.
I believe Nick Saban after the game said he is week to week, so hopefully he comes back for this week. But it wasn't something major. So, like I said, I think this was something to build up for Alabama. As we said last week, this was going to be their defining game, whether they're going to build something here or they're going to sit down and die. And I think they built something up here, and they're on the path to maybe getting to SEC championship, but we will see. Nathan, what did you see from Alabama that really inspired you here? And then what did you see from Ole Miss? I didn't really cover them as much. What do you see from Ole Miss that kind of worries you with their team going forward?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start off with the great things I saw from Alabama. Of course, you got to start with the defense because I think that's been the shining point of this team all season long already, especially in the games they've struggled. You come out in the Ole Miss game, and Ole Miss is top 5 offense in the nation, coming out averaging close to 50 points a game. That's a tall ask for your defense to hold them to 10 points. I think it's been an unbelievable job by Kevin Steele. He's really adjusted his scheme week to week. I know there are some weeks, especially the Texas week, where we didn't get a lot of pressure. We didn't send a lot of blitzes, which I didn't agree with. He comes out in this game. He says, we're going to blitz Jackson Dart time and time again, especially in the second half where the defense got a lot of pressure. Look, Terrion Arnold, after last season, I was about to be done with him, but he comes out in this season, and he looks like an NFL talent. I mean, Kool-Aid is on another level. He's elite. He's going to go be a star in the NFL. Terrion Arnold is getting to the point where he can be a very valuable player in the NFL as well, based on what he's been able to do in coverage. He's not been penalized a lot either, which has been a huge thing coming off of last year, where he got a little handsy and he would really just force so many pass interference calls against him because he would just be so aggressive. But now he's finally started to play smart. Watching him on the outside, turning his head while still being engaged with the wide receiver has been huge. So I've been really impressed with what he's been able to do. And he's just on a different level. Looking at what Dallas Turner has done, I know his first couple of weeks were quiet, but he comes out, especially after last week where he was insane. And I didn't know if he was going to be able to replicate the kind of performance he had. Just because Ole Miss, I gave their offensive line a lot of credit because I think that they are a good offensive line, but they really struggled blocking him in this game. I think got to give credit to Kevin Steele just because of the scheme he had in place, a lot of stunts, a lot of blitzes, gave Dallas Turner and Blackshear a lot of time to get back to the quarterback, to create pressure, and even get a lot of sacks. You talk about the athleticism of Dallas Turner off the edge, how quick he is. I don't know if you remember the play in the game where there were 2 holding goals against Ole Miss, and Dallas Turner still got the sack on Jackson Dart. That was something else. And at that point, the momentum was just all in Alabama's favor. But I still see problems with the defensive line getting pressure, getting off blocks. I think that's just more of a talent standpoint, where Ole Miss's offensive line was pretty much in the same matchup, in the same realm of Alabama's defensive line, which really has not been a thing for a while now, because Alabama usually recruits really good at the defensive line position, usually has huge talents like Quentin Williams, guys like Jonathan Allen. Those guys really inspire you. But in this game, especially late, I think Ole Miss's line got tired, and we were starting to see guys like Tim Smith get in the backfield and get pressure on Jackson Dart, as well as the ends. So the defense is not the problem. Honestly, it could be a top 5 defense in the country, and it's extremely good. It's good enough to win a national championship. The problem lies with the offense. Offense in the first half, it was similar to the USF game. First drive we come out, it looked pretty good. We were able to move the ball a good bit, and then we got down into Ole Miss territory, and we just sat there and died on the field and had to kick a field goal because we made mistakes, because we weren't able to take advantage of what they gave us. Jalen Morrow in the first half really struggled with his reads. You go back to the red zone interception he had, with Jermaine Burton wide open. That wasn't great to see. That's one of the things where you just want to close your eyes and roll into a ball and cry. And for Jalen Morrow, it's a learning process, and he has looked better week to week. But it's really just about eliminating mistakes, and that coincides with Tommy Rees and his play calling. If Tommy Rees puts Jalen Morrow in a bad situation, especially with all the drop back passing he does, then it's not going to be good for the offense. You got to put him in situations where he can succeed, as well as the offensive line, because the offensive line has a ton of problems. So, and I'll mention that here in a second. But Jalen Morrow continues to look better, and the receiving core is just on a different level, a lot different from last year. You're talking about Jalen Hale in this game, really stepped up, made big plays. Especially the throw to the end zone where he had to catch it through contact and keep his feet in, hold on to the ball. He did all of that. Looked really talented, really skilled, and just played his part in the role. Also, Jermaine Burton had a good game. That pass deep, he was able to kind of slide under the Ole Miss defender and make the catch. That was something from him. But overall, just a great job by the receiving core. I don't think we've given them enough credit to this point. And then you get to the offensive line. It's improved, especially in the second half, and it improved a lot. I will say I'll give credit to Tyler Booker a lot, and what he's said a lot in the press conferences, talking about how they're angry and stuff like that. And I was like, I haven't really seen it, but he's been the one guy in the offensive line that has been pretty consistent. I think he's handled his job well, his role well, and there are a lot of plays in this Ole Miss game where he was just pancaking people left and right. And I was like, wow, this is a guy who really inspires. I think he's honestly the leader of this offensive line up until this point. And that's a good thing moving forward. Caden Proctor, he did have points where he struggled in this game. And it wasn't just on pass blocking, it was on run blocking too. And that's been a consistent thing. You saw a time where he was taken out. I don't know if that was because of injury or because he was just tired or because they wanted to try something else out. But he ended up playing the rest of the game. And honestly, he didn't have as many problems as last week. but there's still a lot of things he needs to improve on. Other than that, Seth McLaughlin, dude, he is incapable of snapping the ball sometimes, which my brother plays center and he has zero issues with it. I know it's not in the same level of talent or going against a college team, but when you're playing high school football against Thompson, who has won four in-state championships back to back to back to back, and he can snap the ball perfectly fine against them, I don't understand how he can't snap the ball perfectly fine against a team like Ole Miss. So Seth McLaughlin needs to figure some stuff out. But honestly, it's not just him. It's on Tommy Rees, too. You get back to after we block the punt in the red zone, get the ball at the 1 yard line,
Lord.
and we are in shotgun formation, and the ball gets flying over Jalen Milrow's head because we do not go under center. That is something that never needs to happen again. There is a thing called a QB sneak. I don't know if people watch, but Jalen Hurts and the Eagles do really well. Maybe Tommy Rees needs to take this weekend or the rest of this week to go and watch and how the Eagles run it, because they run it to perfection every single week, and a lot of times they score off it. So I think it's only been stuffed like 2 times out of the 26 times they've ran it. So it's something that works efficiently, and Tommy Rees really needs to look into that. But other than that, this offensive line has improved a lot more from week to week. And you're getting into SEC play now. It's not an easy slate going forward. You can look at the rest of the schedule. Arkansas looked very good. We'll probably talk about them here in a little bit, and LSU. They both looked really good. So there's some tall tasks to this offensive line moving forward, and now it's not the time for them to regress. They just need to keep improving. And of course, credit Jace McClellan in this game. Really just took over the second half. Kind of looked like when Alabama runs the ball in the second half and just tires teams out, looked like Derrick Henry out there, just kept running the ball, putting his head down, gains of 5 to 6 every single play, and finding the end zone late in the game. It was just something special to watch. And I think after the week Roydell Williams had last week, having Jace McClellan come out and have this type of game against Ole Miss says a lot about the rushing attack and how much it's improved, especially since the Texas game where they really struggled. But Alabama, they keep improving. They did not slash down this game, picking up a big win against a very, very good Ole Miss team, which really they have their own problems. Lane Kiffin, as a head coach, he knows where they need to improve, and I think he'll be able to do it. After the game, he really thought that he said that they thought that this was their year to beat this Alabama team. And it gets to show why Nick Saban is the greatest coach in the country, because he can make those type of adjustments, and it doesn't really matter who is out there. He can really just put you in a situation to win, and that's exactly what Alabama did in this game.
Yeah, I think the one thing for Ole Miss for me is just Quinshon Judkins' ineffectiveness this entire year. He just hasn't been that same type of running back we saw last year, and he was coming into the year being this all-SEC preseason running back, and it just hasn't looked the same. I don't know if it's the Ole Miss offensive line run blocking, the scheme for it, or Judkins is dealing with some injury that we don't know of, or if I don't know what it is, but he just isn't the same guy, and that's really the missing aspect of their offense, because last year the running game was what Lane Kiffin relied on more than somebody like Jackson Dart. I'm not saying Jackson Dart's not a good quarterback. I think he's one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC this year. But when you have Quinshon Judkins going over 100 yards consistently like he was last year, getting in the end zone every game, it's just like you lose aspect of your offense that you can't get back. And you talk about Trey Harris not having a reception this game, him dealing with an injury. He's had multiple touchdowns in games this season. He's really been Jackson Dart's go-to guy for touchdowns outside of a guy like Dayton Wade. But they did get the UTS transfer wide receiver Franklin. This game wasn't really effective in what he did, but he's very talented. We saw it at UTSA. Hopefully they can get him more involved in that offense. They get Trey Harris back. I don't think Ole Miss's season's over, or they're even out of the SEC West conversation to make the championship, because as we've seen from Alabama, they can falter. They can lose 1 or 2 games here and there. I hope they don't, but they can. So if you're an Ole Miss fan or an Ole Miss player, I don't think the season's over. Kind of like we talked about Alabama earlier when they lost to Texas. It's only 1 loss. If you can see what mistakes you made, change what you did wrong, fix the mistakes, I think you can still do great things this season. I can see why, moving on to this game, Gray didn't attend this show today because Auburn versus Texas A&M, 27-10, A&M ended up winning that game. And Auburn's only touchdown this game was a fumble recovery for a touchdown by arguably the best player on their roster, Eugene Asante, and a very pretty viral clip with him basically running alongside Jimbo Fisher in the middle of the field. Not sure what Jimbo was doing, but that went viral. And then you had Texas A&M. They lost the starting quarterback, Connor Wegman. Max Johnson came in. They weathered that storm, put up 27 on Auburn. Let's talk about Auburn here. Second straight week where the quarterback play is awful. I don't know what's going on with this room. Peyton Thorne was supposed to be this guy. Last week was better running the ball. Passing the ball was okay. I guess this was the third straight week of kind of struggling with the quarterbacks. Peyton I don't know what's going on with him. He was 6 of 12, 44 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions, and then negative 34 rushing yards attributed to sacks and all that stuff. I don't know what's going on with him. They got to get that figured out. You had Robbie Ashford come in in relief of him in the second half. Honestly, worse. He was 1 of 4 yards. He had 25 yards rushing. So you expect to see Robbie Ashford's stat line. You expect to see more than 25 yards rushing, especially if he has 4 yards passing. They gave Holden Gariner a chance at the end. He didn't look much better. 2 of 7, 8 yards. I don't know if the answer at quarterback is on this roster right now. I don't know what Auburn does from here. If they just do the old Miami Dolphins offense and put Darqueze Hunter Wildcat the entire game and just run the ball, and because none of these quarterbacks can honestly throw the ball, read a defense. I don't know what it is. You look at the running backs. Ryan Battie led this team in rushing with 59 yards. He's also the team's leading receiver with 23 receiving yards. That speaks for itself there. You had Darqueze Hunter with 53 yards rushing. And then Damari Alston did leave the game with an injury and didn't return. It was I believe a shoulder injury. I can't remember what the report said, but I believe that's what it was. He didn't return. He only had 12 yards rushing. Still an update on how the extent of the injury is going to look like for him and how long he's going to be out. But that's a big loss. He's really been the running back they relied on most this year, outside of somebody like Darqueze Hunter, who's dealing with injuries of his own. The receiving core, I think they're the most talented receiving core Auburn's had in a very, very long time. But when you don't have a quarterback to throw the ball to them, they can't do much. It's kind of like Alabama against USF. You have this talented receiving core and the quarterbacks can't get the ball to them. There's no point. Shane Hooks, 3 receptions, 18 yards. Jay Fair, 1 reception, 10 yards. Rifaldo Fairweather, 3 receptions, 5 yards. I think those 3 guys right there are uber talented. But like I said, when you can't get them the ball, they can't help you out on offense. I think Auburn's offense has got a lot of work to do. Philip Montgomery, the OC there, I'm not sure what's going on. I would not be surprised if there's some changes there, whether that be Hugh Freeze takes over the play calling duties like he has in the past at his previous stops. But something's got to change. I'm not sure if it's, like I said, a coaching staff change, a play calling change, or a personnel change, because it is not working. It has not worked. And if you can't score a touchdown against Texas A&M, who I don't think is the greatest team in the world, you're going to definitely get your butts beat by somebody like Georgia. And that defense for Auburn, I think, has been great all year. It's been their strength, kind of like Alabama, but to a much less extent, because Alabama's defense, I think, is miles better than Auburn's. But this game did kind of struggle. Dealt with a lot of injuries in the secondary. You had Keontae Scott. He's out indefinitely with an injury. They lost Donovan Kaufman, J.D. Rim, and Zion Puckett to various injuries this game. I believe Donovan Kaufman tried to come back in multiple times, but was unable to. So they're very thin in the back end of that defense. That's something to look out for. Might have to start a couple freshmen. That's not great. Like I said, I don't know where Auburn goes from here, but something needs to change, because you can't put up 10 points against Texas A&M and expect to go make a bowl game this year, especially how good this SEC is and how competitive it is. Then you look at Texas A&M, like I mentioned earlier, Connor Wegman goes down with an injury, an ankle injury in the second quarter. But they call an LSU transfer, Max Johnson. I think he did a pretty good job. 7 of 11, 123 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. But the story for Texas A&M, I think, was they're able to rely on the run game. You had Le'Veon Moss with 97 rushing yards and a touchdown. Amari Daniels with 85 yards on the ground. Then you had Ruben Owens with 20 yards of his own. So I think Texas A&M has a lot to look at with the run game. When their quarterback goes down, they can really turn to that much more than they had in previous years, with Devon Etienne really being the only guy there and him being kind of bottled up some games. The receiving core, they didn't have there's Noah Thomas, their stud, huge wide receiver. I think he's like 6'5", 6'6", matchup nightmare. But you did have a nice Smith step up with 78 yards. You had Evan Stewart catch a touchdown. And then you had Max Johnson's brother at tight end, Jake, catch a touchdown from his brother. So that was pretty heartwarming to see the brother connection there on a touchdown. But once again, the defense, we're going to talk about this. Texas A&M's defense, I think, has been great. They were great this game. Whether you want to say it was because the Texas A&M defense is actually good, or it's just Auburn's offense is just that bad, or their offensive line is just that bad. But Texas A&M, 7 sacks and 15 tackles for loss. That was pretty absurd for Auburn to have that many tackles for loss. But the stud for Texas A&M was linebacker Edgerrin Cooper. He had 8 tackles, 2 sacks, and 3 TFLs. Texas A&M, you lose a starting quarterback. No update on if he's going to play next week or how long he's going to be out. But I think Texas A&M is a really good football team. They got a lot of talent. Jimbo Fisher looks like he's kind of figuring stuff out. I know he lost to Miami. But I think he's figuring stuff out. Nathan, what did you make of both these teams here? Auburn and Texas A&M?
Yeah, I'm going to go and start off with Texas A&M because they're the bright spot in this game. I will say their offense has some issues, and I will attribute that to Connor Weigman going out with his injury. I was very impressed with how Matt Johnson pretty much handled the adversity of having to step into that starting quarterback role and lead this team to a victory against a talented Auburn team. So I think the offense lacked in some areas, but really Matt Johnson took advantage of the chance he was given and really pulled this game out for him. Texas A&M's defense was all over the place. They were constricting Auburn's offense. Auburn pretty much went 3 and out every series they stepped on the field, which I don't know if you can attribute that to Texas A&M's defense being that good or Auburn's offense being that terrible. You decide
a combination of both.
Yeah, it's probably a little bit of both. But Texas A&M really just looked confident whenever they stepped out on the field. Looked like they knew what they were doing, and not really second guessing themselves. Jimbo Fisher, the amount of talent he has had on every single team he's had, and I really think this isn't his most talented team, but it's still very talented, and they were finally starting to put it together. I know that loss to Miami was bad, but it just like Ole Miss, just like Alabama, one loss isn't going to completely change your season, especially because that's a very good Miami team. So I think Texas A&M's definitely headed in the right direction. Got some big games coming up in conference play, and really you just got to look forward to what's the next game on your schedule and handle it one game at a time if you're a Texas A&M fan. Moving on to Auburn. Yeah, I'll go ahead and start with their defense because I don't think their defense is that bad. I think their defense played pretty good. They held Texas A&M in the first half to I forget. It was a low-scoring first half affair. I know that. It really held Texas A&M's offense from moving the ball down the field, found different ways to get off the field on third downs, which was really inspiring. But injuries killed them in the second half. They weren't able to really just keep the same personnel in just because everyone just fell down every single play. And if it was not the heat and the cramping, it was something else, a stinger or someone else having to come out with an ankle injury or a shoulder injury. Any of those, anything like that happened to this Auburn defense, and it really depleted their secondary. I think their defensive line did a good job of really holding that running game for Texas A&M. I think Texas A&M really struggled on the ground a lot more than they did struggling through the air. But this Auburn defense, it's not their fault. They played pretty much the whole game. Now looking towards the Auburn offense, quarterback position, Peyton Thorne, Bozo. Absolute bozo. Cannot throw the ball. Cannot do anything for this Auburn offense. Robbie Ashford comes in, second bozo of the week. Cannot throw the ball. At least he can run, but he sucks too. And Holden Gardner is not going to be the answer either. He is too young. He doesn't understand what's going on quite yet. And I don't really think you can even include him in this quarterback conversation. It comes down to having a guy who can make plays or not make plays. And Robbie Ashford and Peyton Thorne are guys who cannot make plays. They first 3 games of the season, you play UMass, you play Cal, and you play Sanford. Not great competition, not great defenses. Peyton Thorne comes out, Robbie Ashford comes out. They look like they have great gains. Auburn fans are really excited for what they have in the offensive end. You come out, you finally play a real defense, and it's like you crap your pants. It looks like you lay down on the field and just die and surrender, because that's what Peyton Thorne did all game long. Hugh Freeze finally had enough of him, put Robbie Ashford in. He had the same experience. Puts Holden Gardner out. I feel sorry for him because he just does not have a clue what's going on. And for Auburn had this type of receiving crew and this type of running back room, and really their offensive line, which is 10 times improved from last year, for them to have all this talent in every other position, but have the quarterback position look like you put a scarecrow out there, it's horrible. And I really thought Hugh Freeze would do a better job, and everyone was excited with Peyton Thorne coming and transferring from Michigan State. He was the problem at Michigan State. I don't know if anyone watched a game last year of Michigan State playing, but Peyton Thorne was horrible every single game. His receivers left him. I don't know if y'all remember that.
Yeah, Coleman.
There's a reason Keon Coleman is down in Florida State in Tallahassee right now, and it's because Peyton Thorne played quarterback at Michigan State. So Auburn's offense is in shambles right now until they find a quarterback that has a pulse. And I don't think it's going to be this year. Peyton Thorne's going to have to stay in there. He's probably your best choice. And that's a sad thing to say, because this Auburn team is really, really talented and took advantage of the transfer portal. Hugh Freeze recruited very, very well in the offseason, and they just come out here and look like the same old Auburn team of past. And their schedule's not going to get any easier, is the thing. It's going to get harder and harder every week. And if you want to make a bowl game this year, you're going to have to figure something out, because wasting all this talent is not going to look good for Hugh Freeze, especially with the recruiting he has done. It's going to look very negative. And for Auburn to go in the right direction, you're going to have to see something done on the offensive end, because that has been the problem for the past 5 to 10 years. It's disgusting to this point.
Yeah, that was a rough game for Auburn fan. Let's move on. You had UAB take on number 1 Georgia. Pretty obvious. Georgia ended up winning that game 49-21. I think UAB did a great job keeping it competitive and making Georgia make some uncharacteristic turnovers in the first half. Sadly, when you're playing Georgia and you're UAB, you're not expected to go in there and beat them, and they didn't. But I thought, like Trent Dilfer said after the game, there's a lot to build off of and much improvement from the previous week when they got blown out by a backup quarterback. You have Jacksonville State beat Eastern Michigan 21-0. Jacksonville State starting out the season 3-1, their first season in that FBS. So, hey, Jacksonville State fans, I mean, 3-1, baby. 3 more games and you're bowl eligible. 3 more wins and you're bowl eligible. All right, let's move on to a big game here. You had Florida State take on Clemson. Florida State ended up winning the game 31-24 in overtime. And that touchdown in overtime was actually Florida State's first lead of the entire game. That was their first lead. Jordan Travis, kind of underwhelming here, 21-37, 289 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He did have a rushing touchdown. The Florida State running game, as it's been all season, very ineffective. Trey Benson, only 25 rushing yards, and his backup, Rodney Hill, only had 1. But the receiving duo of Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman, studs, maybe the second best in the country behind the Ohio State one. Johnny Wilson, 94 receiving yards, or maybe probably the third, I'm sorry, because he had Washington's wide receiver duo.
Can't forget about that.
And then you have Keon Coleman with 86 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns of his own. I think the Florida State offense relies a little too much on the jump ball and the one-on-one for my liking. I know they're going to probably win them. They're probably 80-20, 90-10 balls when they throw them. But when you play other teams, like when you get to the point, if you get to the point, you play somebody like Georgia or an Alabama, it's going to be a struggle to win the jump balls, the one-on-one, when you're playing those type of DBs compared to somebody like Clemson, who I know they have some talented DBs, but they're not what they used to be and not what you have in the SEC and the Big Ten. The defense really didn't end up winning Florida State this game. 3 sacks, 7 TFLs. And then the fumble recovered for a touchdown by Kalen DeLoach ended up tying the game, I believe. So the Florida State defense did do their job. But like I said, the Florida State offense has a lot to work on. They can't keep relying on these jump balls. They got to get the running game going because it has been horrid all season. It wasn't even great in the LSU game. So they got to get that going to continue to win football games and to hopefully work their way up to making the college football playoff like they're expected to. Moving on to Clemson, the absolute dumpster fire it is right now. 0-2 in the ACC because he lost to Duke earlier in the season. Cade Klubnik, okay, he's not Trevor Lawrence. He's not Deshaun Watson. 25-38, 283 yards, a touchdown. Had one rushing touchdown of his own. He did fumble the ball twice and lost one of them. He didn't have that great, I think, of a game, but he did battle with Jordan Travis, and they pretty much had similar games. The Clemson running back duo of Phil Maffa and Will Shipley did their job. Maffa 69 rushing yards, Shipley had 67 rushing yards and a touchdown, and then Shipley had a receiving touchdown as well. Then you had receiver Tyler Brown, who I believe is a freshman, lead the team in receiving yards with 84. But the defense for Clemson coming into this year thought it was going to be one of the best in the country because they have so many studs there. They got defensive tackle Tyler Davis. You got probably who I thought was the best linebacker in the country, and Jeremiah Trotter Jr., but it just hasn't looked that way. I think the DBs did a pretty good job the entirety of that game, battling with the Florida State receivers. But when you can't get pressure like they weren't getting on Jordan Travis, and it's really ineffective offense they were having, it was just a struggle overall for Clemson. Nathan, what does Dabo do here? Because this is going to be the second straight year or the third straight year, where the team just doesn't look good. And he doesn't use the transfer portal. He's sworn it off. So what does Dabo do from here?
It's a situation where you either have to modernize or get out. If you're not going to modernize, if you're not going to use the transfer portal, if you're not going to improve your team the offseason, other than just doing your regular recruiting, then you're just going to go ahead and have to get out, whether that means retirement for Dabo Swinney if he wants nothing to do with the sport, or he can go to the NFL and figure something else out. Because honestly, I think he's a good coach. I think he struggles in a lot of areas, especially with being hard-headed when it comes to using some modernized stuff like the transfer portal. You don't have to like it, but if you want to be successful in college football and put your team in a place to win games, you have to take advantage of the tools you're given, just like every other coach in the country has done. So this is on him. I think this is on Garrett Riley too, in his crappy offensive play calling in overtime. Even though I think he did have a better game, Kate Klubnik, he played a better game. I don't think you can expect him to be Trevor Lawrence. That's not fair to him. He's pretty much a game manager. He played the game he was supposed to play. I think he did a fantastic job in the situation he was put in. Both running backs, Maffa and Shipley, two guys who just take advantage of the situation they're put in as well. Really put the team on their back when they need to. And really, this Clemson offense wasn't what had struggled most of the game. I think it more comes down to the defense not being able to get off the field in key scenarios. You talk about Florida State, they struggled in the first half, but then they come out in the second half and they just look like a different team. They really put it together, really had the championship DNA when it came down to clutch moments, which you really look to and say, wow, these are the guys who can make plays for this team, especially Jordan Travis. He looked pretty calm under pressure. And trust me, he did not look good in this game at all, which was very different to see from him. Look, Florida State, they're a very talented team. I didn't think they'd be put in the situation that they were put in this weekend. But I think this says a lot about Clemson and that they are a talented team still. They just have areas where they struggle in. And I think it really just goes as a coaching. This season for Clemson, your championship hopes are over. You're not going to make the playoff. You already have 2 losses into the season. And your schedule is so it's kind of a gauntlet. So, that's something to say for Clemson, because usually you look at their schedule and say, wow, that's an easy undefeated run for Clemson right there, straight to the easy to championship. But after you drop the game to Duke, you drop the game to Florida State, it's not looking good for you. And I know Clemson fans, I would say they deserve better, but they're kind of annoying. So they kind of deserve what has happened to them. But something needs to change in Clemson. Whether that be Dabo Swinney figuring out that the transfer portal is a good thing for the university, or the university needs to decide, hey, Dabo, if you're not actually going to be a good coach, you can go ahead and leave. Because I think it's to that point.
Yeah, I think he's got to adapt and survive or get out of the way. Moving on to, I think, probably the game of the week. You had number 6 Ohio State versus number 9 Notre Dame. Ohio State ended up winning that game 17-14 in a walk-off touchdown from running back Chip Trayanum. Talking about Ohio State, I think Kyle McCord played a pretty good game, similar to a guy like Cade Klubnik, just kind of a game manager. He was 21-37, 240 yards. Didn't throw a touchdown, didn't have an interception, though. Travion Henderson looked like he was supposed to be earlier in the season. He turned it on here. 104 yards on the ground and a touchdown. As I mentioned, Trainum, the backup running back, having a touchdown at the end of the game to seal it. But the receiving room, Marvin Harrison Jr. did leave the game and then returned after suffering an ankle injury. He didn't look great after the injury. I'm not sure what the timeline looks for him if he's going to play. I know Ohio State has a bye this week, I believe, but next week they do have the next week they do have a game that they're going to have to hopefully get Marvin Harrison back with. He was kind of held in his own. I think the Notre Dame DBs did a great job covering him, but then you have Mecca Bukum on the other side. He had 96 receiving yards on that final drive. It was like there was nobody guarding him. I mean, he was just finding the soft spot in the zone and just sitting down, and Kyle McCullough was just finding him. I don't know what was going on there for Notre Dame, but good job for Ohio State scheming that up and Emeka Bukum really finding that soft spot. Cade Stover continues to be just a good, reliable option from McCord. He had 52 receiving yards of his own. The Ohio State defense, I did think it did a pretty good job. They didn't have a sack, only 2 TFLs, but this was a defensive battle. They the stats don't reflect it, but they did a really good job containing that Notre Dame run game, containing Sam Hartman, who's supposed to be a Heisman candidate this year, but it didn't make him look like that. So I think the Ohio State defense did a great job doing that. You flip over to Notre Dame, Sam Hartman, I don't know, 175 passing yards, a touchdown, no interceptions. Then the quad running backs of Estime, Love, Price, and Payne. They did pretty okay. Estime didn't have that great performance we were looking for. Only had 70 rushing yards, and Love followed that up with 57 of his own. The receiving game, tight end Mitchell Evans, 75 yards. Outside of that, kind of ineffective. Like I said, the defense for Notre Dame played really good, really good. The corners did a great job on the receivers. But then it got to that final drive, and the defense fell apart. They couldn't cover Emeka Bukum, like I said. And then you go to the last 2 plays of the game. And in both plays, there is 10 men on the field. 10. Not 12, not 11. 11 like they're supposed to be. 10. And to make it worse, on the second to last play, Marcus Freeman called a timeout. And they come out and still have 10 men on the field. I know they get the stop, but they have 10 men on the field. And then they come back to the next play, the final play of the game, have 10 men on the field again. I don't know how you do that. I don't know, even after calling a timeout, how you don't have 11 men on the field. I don't know. And to make it, and even to put a cherry on top, the whole right side of the defensive line or left side if you're on Ohio State, there was nobody there. There was no down defensive lineman, no nothing. And they ran right at it, Ohio State did, and they scored the game-winning touchdown. I mean, that final drive for Notre Dame on defense was just a comedy of errors. Ohio State picked them apart. Good job for Ryan Day for actually winning a big-time game, because if he didn't, I'm pretty sure Ohio State fans have been all over Twitter asking him for him to be fired. After the game, he had some pretty colorful words for Lou Holtz. I'm not sure where that came from, why he was attacking Lou Holtz, who was like, 86, I think, 90. He's old. Nathan, what did you make of this game as a whole, especially with Notre Dame on the last drive?
Yeah, I gotta sit here and think of pretty much the comedic relief that was Notre Dame's defense that last drive. Look, I think it's a real competition between playing prevent defense or playing the defense you played all game, but kind of playing a little more lenient, but keeping everything in front of you. I think the man defense was the answer. Running a 2 deep zone and having everyone else in man, playing tight coverage, but making sure everything is in front of you. I think that was the right answer right there. And instead, Notre Dame said, oh, wow, there's prevent. We're going to play soft zone and let them move the ball all the way down the field. And we're just going to crap our pants on national television, because that is exactly what they did. Marcus Freeman, bozo. Absolute bozo. Last 2 plays, he had 10 men on the field. And Ohio State realizes they look at the left side there, and it's wide open and says, hey, free touchdown, free win. And they just run right up the middle. And it is not rocket science for them. They saw the incompetency of the Notre Dame defense, and they ran right at it. So that it goes all back to Marcus Freeman and the coaching right there. And that is pathetic. Your team is in a situation to win. One of the best games I've seen in a while. I know it was a defensive battle. It wasn't anything crazy high scoring. Usually not something people like to watch. But when it comes down to clutch time and you make errors like this and it affects your team in this way, you got to take responsibility for it. And I really don't think he did a good job of that. Will Holtz making comments about Ohio State and their team being soft. I don't think it's completely wrong. I don't think that team's very, very strong. I think they kind of play soft. And ultimately, I know they won this game. And Ryan Day said, we have a pretty strong team. I'm sorry, their team still looked pretty soft. They really needed every last ditch effort to beat a Notre Dame team that I really don't think is that good. And Kyle McCord at quarterback, he's a game manager. He's probably not going to be that good. He's just going to have to do the job he was asked. He's not going to be CJ Stroud. He's not going to be any of these great Ohio State quarterbacks you've had in the past. He's just going to have to do the job he is supposed to do. He has the receiving talent to do it, although Marvin Harrison being injured, I don't know what that spells for the rest of the season. But this Ohio State team is very talented, and they're going to keep winning games because, let's be honest, the Big Ten's just not that competitive. Other than, I'd say the Penn State game is the biggest one to look at for me, because honestly, I think Penn State is probably the best team in the Big Ten right now. That's my vote. Their defense is off the charts. Their offense keeps figuring it out every single week. Michigan, we haven't seen them play a team with a pulse yet. So I don't know how to gauge them, but they have a ton of talent across the board. And they've had Ohio State's number the past 2 years. So it's early on in the season, and I'm not saying Ohio State is just going to come out and run the rest of the table and win, but I'm also not going to say that they're going to lose out in anything like that. I think they're a very talented team, but I don't know what to make of this offense until I see them play a little bit of a better team than Notre Dame, because I think people will give a lot of credit to Notre Dame just because of Sam Harden transferring in, and he just looked like Undercraft in this game.
Yeah, Notre Dame, I don't think they're that great of a team. I think they're a top 25 team, but I don't think they're going to be college football playoff material whatsoever. Moving on to the battle for the boot, you had number 12 LSU taking on Arkansas for that. LSU ended up winning 34-31. Arkansas did have a chance to let LSU kind of go into the end zone and give KJ Jefferson and the offense a chance, but instead they decided to tackle the guy and just let LSU run the clock out. Not sure what the thought process was there. Nathan, you were having the same kind of reaction with what are we doing here?
This is my game of the week, personally. I think that this was the game of the week. Arkansas in the first half came out with it's doing great. They come out and it's a back and forth offensive battle. And I think LSU got the ball with 5 minutes left, and they went and ran the rest of the timeout because Arkansas doesn't understand time management. You could have pushed the guy into the end zone, gotten your offense back on the field. But instead, they just sat there and died on the defensive end, letting LSU run I don't know. It felt like 10 plays inside the red zone and giving a extra point field goal attempt. So, I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah. The LSU offense looked really good. Jaden Daniels, 20-29, 320 yards, 4 touchdowns. Logan Diggs, the running back transfer from Notre Dame, had 97 rushing yards. Then the wide receiver duo, Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Neighbors, played great for the second straight week. Thomas Jr., 133 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then Neighbors, 130 yards and 2 touchdowns of his own. Continued to play pretty good football at the receiver position at LSU. Then you have Arkansas. KJ Jefferson played pretty good. 289 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 costly interceptions. He did have 48 rushing yards, and they were without their running back, Rocket Sanders. That was a big issue for him. Rashad Dubinion had 78 rushing yards. But I think the story for Arkansas was their freshman tight end, Luke Hasz. He had 160 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns. A couple years ago, they had a guy in Trey Knox who looked very good, kind of faded away. Now he's at South Carolina. But to see Luke Hasz have this type of performance really has a bright future for Arkansas, whoever the quarterback is there in next year when KJ Jefferson inevitably leaves after 25 years in college football.
Stetson Bennett moment.
Yeah, but the Arkansas story for me was the penalties they inflicted on themselves. They had 11 of them. Multiple of them were false starts, various offensive line issues, holding, stuff like that. That was an issue when they lost to BYU. Still don't clean him up this week. Sam Pittman was absolutely losing his mind on the sideline. Even had to sit down and talk to the offensive line and figure out what was going on. But when you decide you're just going to let LSU bleed the clock for the rest of the game instead of just letting them go into the end zone and give your offense a chance to respond, you're not going to win. And sorry, Arkansas, I don't know what you were doing. This was the game for Arkansas right here. If they won this game, I honestly think they had a chance to win the SEC West this year. But you go and lose this game, and I know it's only one loss in SEC play, but they've lost 2 games in the season. So kind of like with Clemson, you're not competing for the college football playoff, even though they weren't competing for it to begin the season. But you're definitely not competing for the SEC championship appearance.
Mm-mm.
All right, we did have 2 upsets this week. You had number 21 Washington State beat number 14 Oregon State 38-35 in the Battle of the Pac-2. Cameron Ward, the quarterback for Washington State, 404 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, added a rushing touchdown of his own. He found wide receiver Kyle Williams for 174 yards receiving and a touchdown, and then wide receiver Josh Kelly had 159 yards and 3 touchdowns. Pretty good performance from Washington State. DJ Ayungale, the Oregon State quarterback, former Clemson, had a pretty okay game, 17-34, 198 yards, 1 passing touchdown and interception. He had 61 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. I think Oregon State did a pretty good job making it competitive late. It's just Washington State had that big lead, and Oregon State just wasn't able to overcome it. And the other upset we had was with West Virginia beating Texas Tech 20-13. For Texas Tech, they did lose their quarterback, Tyler Show, in the first quarter with a left leg injury, and he never returned. So that was kind of their big issue. But now Texas Tech, I mean, they only have 1 win on the season. Nathan had him projected to compete for the Big 12 championship. Not looking like that's going to happen. Sorry, Nathan. I know that was your prediction.
It's just all disappointment from here on out.
It's all disappointment. Yep. All right, moving to some other storylines. You had number 5 USC escape a scare from Arizona State and pull away late in the fourth quarter to win 42-28. Caleb Williams pretty underwhelming in my opinion. Looked pretty rattled to start the game. 20-31, 322 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, no interceptions. But he got a lot of help from his running game. South Carolina transfer Marshawn Lloyd had 154 yards on the ground. Hopefully USC figures this out. I know they play Colorado, but I mean, when you struggle against Arizona State and you have to play teams like Oregon coming up, a little bit of a worry for USC. A little bit. You had number 7 Penn State shut out number 24 Iowa, 31-0 behind Drew Lars, 4 passing touchdowns. And Nathan, just listen to this here. The time of possession difference, 45 minutes and 27 seconds for Penn State, 14 minutes and 33 seconds for Iowa. That's the time of possession. Iowa possessed the ball for 14 minutes. 14.
Yeah, honestly, it's not much of a surprise when Iowa's offense is the worst thing I've ever seen. There's a lot of D3 schools that would give them a run for their money on the offensive end.
Yeah, offensive coordinator Brian Ferentz, who is head coach Kirk Ferentz's son, has a contract that states the team must average 25 points per game and win 7 games for him to keep his job. And they are just barely above that mark because of the 41 points they scored against Western Michigan. Nathan, do you think both Ferentzes should be fired after this year, even though Iowa is still only 3-1?
Yeah, it was a decision. It was the right decision last year after last year and what happened. But this year, if it doesn't happen, Iowa fans are just gonna want to die. And honestly, I can't blame them because after watching your offense do absolutely nothing in the 14 minutes they had the ball, oh gosh, Iowa, man. You can have the best defense in the world, yet your offense can't move the ball 2 inches. I'm sorry.
Yeah, moving on, you had the Michael Penix Jr. Heisman campaign continue. He had 304 yards, 4 passing touchdowns, 1 interception, in a 59-32 win against Cal. Funny story here is Washington scored 14 points, and Michael Penix didn't even take the field. So I think Washington's a very big threat to make the college football playoff if Penix keeps playing like that and they continue to play this way on both sides of the football. All right, then you had number 10 Oregon absolutely eviscerate number 19 Colorado, 42-6. Bo Nix, 276 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, added a rushing touchdown there. Colorado quarterback Shedeur Sanders, 23-33, 159 passing yards, a touchdown, and he was sacked 70 times. And Colorado ended up having a net rushing yards of 40. I believe at the end of the first half, they had like some negative rushing yard number. I can't remember the exact one, but it was pretty bad. I knew Colorado wasn't great going into this game when they were struggling to beat Colorado State. and this really just proved it here. I think Deion's doing a great thing building this program, but that defense is awful. Charles Kelly is crap. The offensive line for Colorado is not great either. Didn't give Shedeur a lot of time in the pocket. Then you had number 14 Utah, stay unbeaten with a 14-7 win over number 22 UCLA. And quarterback Cam Rising for Utah still has not played any game this season, and they're still unbeaten. So this team has a huge ceiling. I mean, if Cam Rising comes back and is still not playing, and he comes back and they're still unbeaten, I mean, maybe talking about a CFP appearance if they continue to play like this, defensively at least.
There's only 4 spots out. It's not all Pac-12 teams can make it.
I mean, but Pac-12 is pretty good this year.
They look good right now. I will say we're 4 weeks into the season. Offense is off the charts. Defense, I don't know. I'll see it when I believe it, because honestly, it looks like kind of the Big 12 situation right now. And I'm not going to basically jump on the Pac-12 ship and say I'm going to ride it to the CFP. I think one of the teams is bound to make the CFP, but which one, I don't know. I mean, well, I think USC, Oregon, Washington, maybe Utah in there. So that's 4 teams that you can argue are good enough to make it. Not to mention, I think maybe at one point you can mention Washington State in there, the way they've been playing football. They've been looking pretty good. So that's what's very competitive, I will say, or, whatever one you call it, since all these teams are basically moving out anyway, except for Washington State. So I don't know. It's all over the place.
All right. The last 2 things we got to cover here. Missouri remains unbeaten as they beat Memphis 34-27. Now, I believe after the new AP poll, Missouri is now ranked. So hopefully Eli Drinkwitz keeps his job if Missouri can keep playing like this.
I think he will.
And then the last thing, despite 487 passing yards for quarterback Phillip Rogers, Mississippi State loses to South Carolina 37-30 and falls to 0-2 in SEC play. There are question marks around Zach Arnett as the head coach. I'm not sure if it's the answer, but I don't know how much longer he lasts if this team continues to lose games in SEC play and doesn't look great on the defensive side of football, which Zach Arnett is known for.
Yeah, pretty sad.
All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening and watching, students of the game.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.